This lecture has been made available to you courtesy of the American Numismatic Society.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here this Friday afternoon. It's my pleasure to introduce our guest today, Dr. Stuart Sears. Stuart is an independent researcher, translator of Arabic, and an American Numismatic Society Life Fellow. He's written extensively on Islamic numismatics and on the social and political thought of late antique and early medieval Near East, including the later mobilized types of Sijistan-Sasanian style drams, for which he was awarded the quadrennial prize of the Royal Belgium Numismatic Society. Today, he will be discussing pictorial coppers of 8th century Syro-Palestine. And with that, I turn it over to you, Stuart.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the introduction and the opportunity to speak to everybody today. We've had, the ANS has had an excellent series of online long table lectures, and I'm happy to present something on early Islamic coinage, which is a little bit underrepresented so far. The title of my talk is The Representation of Wild Nature on the Pictorial Coppers of 8th century Syro-Palestine. These are a sample of the kinds of images that we have on these so-called pictorial coppers. When people think about Islamic coinage, they oftentimes think of all epigraphic coins. In fact, when you work with coppers, you find that there is a wide range of motifs in Syria and also in Iran Shah to the east. These images are notable in that they combine images of nature with plainly religious slogans, and they usually have very little administrative information. So so the message is the image of nature connected with some kind of statement about God. Now, when we talk about nature, we're talking about the physical world around us, animate beings that are not human, inanimate objects, and natural phenomena. The nature that is presented on these coins is what I call wild nature. It emphasizes the wild aspects of nature, its distance from human beings and humankind. When we talk about wild nature, we have certain biblical associations and early Christian associations that are helpful in understanding it as as a spiritual statement. In the Bible, when they talk about, let's say, for instance, baptism, they talk about leaving the city and going down to the Jordan River for a baptism. And that idea of going from the city, which is a human habitation, place of human habitation, down to the river is the idea that you are now going into the wilderness in order to come closer to God. You probably have similar analogies with Moses going out in the wilderness and talking to God. With early Christianity, you had early Christian ascetics would leave the city or a settled area, and they would set up a station either in a cave or on a pillar, and in the process of doing that, they were dissociating themselves from sort of civilized or human civilization and drawing themselves closer to God. So when we see these images of the natural world on these coins, we should keep in mind that they're not sort of whimsical images. They have a spiritual significance. Now, as symbols, these images can represent a manifestation of God generally, they're just the general idea of nature, or they can also represent a quality or attribute of nature. So if we see a fruit tree, well, that is the kind of the quality of God being bountiful. If we see a wild creature, like say, like a lion, that can evoke the image of strength and fierceness against God's enemies. At the same time, these attributes or qualities that are attributed to God may be claimed in some way by humankind, by the people who are striking these coins. And I think it's a common observation that we project onto God things that we wish for ourselves or ascribe to ourselves. And the same is true of the people striking coins at this time. And we can talk about some examples of this when we get into this. Now, when we talk about wild beings, I'm going to go through here and go through a whole wide range of animals that are represented on here. One of the most common is the lion. And this lion is normally associated with Tiberius. And here we have two different images of the lion. Lions were actually present in Palestine up until about the early 14th century. And of course, they are extinct today from that area. We also have a fox on the left, and we have a scorpion on the right. We have a horse on the left, and we have an elephant on the right. And you can imagine the qualities that are evoked by these. An elephant is a very large animal, sort of evokes the immensity of God. A horse is the mode of transportation and just force of nature. We have a fish, and we have a bird in flight. And it's interesting, the bird is in flight. That emphasizes the wild nature of this bird. A bird in captivity is not flying. We have wheat. We have pomegranates, plants. Here we have a fruit tree on the left. We have a lily on the right. We have some inanimate objects, such as on the left, there's a crescent. There's also a wheat on one side of the coin. And to the right, there are two different images of a sun. I wanted to make a couple comments here. Some people will refer to the sun as a star. In the Near East, late antiquity, certainly the early Muslim period, the sun was the more symbolic image rather than a star. And there's in pre-Islamic Arabia, the sun was venerated. Even in late antique Christianity, early medieval Christianity, the sun was venerated as a symbol of God or Jesus. And so when I see symbols like this, I refer to them as suns, not stars, because unless there's evidence to the contrary, that is the more probable association that people at that time would have made. In the 7th century, suns, and to a lesser extent crescents, and wheat were common on coins in Syria. In the 8th century, they tend to disappear, and so we get these images of animals. We have the symbol on the left, a candelabra or a menorah, and on the right of a censer. And the candelabra or the menorah, of course, it holds holds fire, it holds flames, and then the censer, it burns incense. And so in the context of the images that we are seeing here, the association I see in these images is the evocation of some kind of natural element, either fire or incense. One thing you never see in any of these images are human representations. Now, the general format is very simple. You have an image, a motif. You have one or two general formats. The first is you have the image, the motif on the obverse, surrounded by the legend, there is no God but God alone. Okay, that's the first part of a basic Muslim statement of faith. And the reverse has the legend, Muhammad is the messenger of God. There are no other legends normally. There's not normally they don't mention the mint, the date, or the ruler. They don't mention more general legends, the weight or any other kind of administrative information. Everything is very stripped down. Coins at a slightly earlier date would have had many of these different elements of information. Alternatively, you might have the image on the reverse. So here we have the horse on the reverse. On the obverse, we have there is no God but God alone. And on the reverse, we have that image of the horse, and we have Muhammad as the messenger of God. And so in some sense, symbolically, when you place the image, the motif, next to the phrase, there is no God but God, you tend to draw an association with God, between God and in this case, the lion, the God and the motif. And when you have the image surrounded by the legend, Muhammad is the messenger of God, then you tend to draw the association between that image and the message that Muhammad is a messenger of God. In one case, we're setting up an equivalence with God. Another case, we're setting up an equivalence with Muhammad as a messenger of God. And in the first case, the horse is a manifestation of God. In the second case, the horse is a manifestation of God in the same way Muhammad is the manifestation of God. Muhammad represents God, and then in the natural world, a horse or other wild animal or plant or natural phenomena represents God. Now, what's curious is the motifs may appear in left profile or right profile. So on the left, we have a lion, facing to the right, and then we have it facing to the left. The image on the right, we have the fox facing to the left, and facing to the right, and then facing to the left. I draw your attention to this in that there is a sense when you look at these coins that the general layout of these coins, it has a certain resemblance, and it suggests that there was an administrative body that was regulating these coins, or loosely regulating these coins between the different mints. And so you find certain common characteristics such as the legends, the formula of the legends, and the rendering of these images. You don't normally have secondary images. It's just this one motif by itself. There's no background to it, and there's certainly never any human representation. Now, in some places like Tiberias or Tabaria, we can see a general evolution of this type. So on the upper left, we have a copper. On the obverse, we have that statement of God's unity. There is no God but God alone. On the reverse, we had Muhammad as the messenger of God. And we have the motif next to that statement of Muhammad's messengership. But the motif does not take up the whole field. It takes up a part of the field. You also notice that around the margins, we have marginal legends. And in the upper left, that marginal legend states the name of the ruler that struck the coin. It gives the date and the mint. It gives administrative information. And on the reverse, we have the same thing, only instead of the image of a lion, we have what could be either a piece of wheat or a palm placing it. We have legends on both the obverse and the reverse, and we have similarly, they give the same administrative information. Subsequently, it seems, if you look at the coin in the upper left, we have at the very top of the reverse field, you can see it, there's a bird flying to the right. Is everybody able to see that? You're seeing the bird in profile, and the beak, the beak is pointing down, and you have it's right above there's 3 lines of legends. It's right above the first line of legends. On the obverse, which is to the left, you have there is no God but God alone. There is no marginal legend on this issue. On the reverse, you have a marginal legend around the reverse field that states that the coin was struck in Tobari, but without mentioning of the ruler or the date. But it's that bird that is most significant. We've now moved it from the right of the legend to above the legend, and we have the bird in flight. So again, it emphasizes that wildness of that bird. In the image to the lower left, this theme is developed further. We have the statement of God's unity on the left. There is no God but God alone. And on the right, we have now the image of the bird takes up the whole field. It's rendered a bit unnaturally, but it's rendered so that you can see it's partly in profile, but you see both wings extended. And I would argue that, like the bird above, it is showing both wings extended in order to emphasize the wild nature of a bird in flight. And that bird is facing to the left. Is everybody able to see that on the birds, or are you having trouble seeing it? Okay. Now, so one of the things that I observe in these coins is that there are administrative linkages between these different issues, that these are not just random issues that with every mint going off and striking, what they want, that you note that there are similarities across the different mints that are most convincingly explained to me by there being some kind of administrative directive to, move people away from striking all epigraphic coins to striking coins with it. It fits a loose set of regulations. Now here we have the upper left. We have a coin with the fox on the right side, and And then we have legends or circular legends, and then we have legends on the other side. This is a bit of a strange coin in that it departs from that general format that I've been talking about. We have on the reverse, we have the statement of Muhammad is the messenger of God, and then the Qur'anic verse, and we also have the name of the ruler. On the obverse, we just have the image of the animal. And around the marginal legend, it says that the coin was struck in Hims, which is a city in Syria, southern Syria. Now, we have to the lower right a coin that has the statement of faith, God's unity on the obverse, there is no God but God. And on the reverse, it says, this was struck in Damascus. An image of a sun with a crescent and a pellet. But there it is. Now, the curious coin that we have is in the lower left. Here we have the image of a fox, very similar in posture to the fox on the upper left. And that's a very unusual animal. It's only known to be struck at the mint of Hims. And that here it is on this very rare specimen, a coin that says this is struck in Damascus. So there is some kind of linkage there between the issue in Damascus and the issue in Hims. We have a number of mints that are occasionally mentioned on these coins, and these mints tell us, all come from Palestine or southern Syria. So the upper left, we have a coin from Hims. We have the lower left, it comes a coin from Amman in Jordan. The upper right, we have a coin from Ramla in Palestine, and then the lower right, we have a coin that is from Cabiria or Tiberias. Okay, now dating of these coins, in some cases we have overstrikes that help us place these coins chronologically. And on the left, we're very fortunate when we have a coin with a date. And the date is 120 Hijra, which corresponds to 737 of the Common Era. And given the, this thematic development of that coin, that suggests that that was probably at the early end of these issues. And so that most of the coins that we're seeing were struck sometime later. The coin on the right, we know was struck at Hims. We know the name of the ruler, Marwan bin Bashir. So the coin on the left, belonged to the Caliph al-Walid II. He ruled from approximately 743 to 744. We have an anomaly there because the date says 120. But either you take the date that's on that coin or you take the name of the ruler. We're talking about somewhere in that early period. Marwan bin Bashir was a client of Walid II, or not Walid II, the predecessor to al-Walid II. So he belonged to the Umayyad regime and plausibly struck coins on behalf of the Umayyads. And there are some people that would argue that he acted on behalf of the early Abbasids, but there's no positive evidence to confirm that. Okay, so I want to go back to the symbolism of these coins. As I said, they represent wild nature, and that wild nature is connected to God. And that's evident in the legends that occur with them. They're almost always a statement of God's unity or a statement of Muhammad's messengership. On a few coins, we actually have Qur'anic verse. And this reinforces the idea that these animals or these images of nature are evocations of God or affirmations of God's authority. And this is what we got. On the left, or the upper left, we have a coin that on the obverse has the image of a lion facing to the left. And it has, in the legends, it has God is one. And then it has a word after God is one that we can't decipher yet because it's partially damaged. I can make some guesses, but we don't have a clear representation of the word that came after it. And this coin is otherwise known only by this one specimen. God is one is the one of the lines of the Syro-Palestine, where they say God is one, God is eternal, God was not born, God does not beget and was not begotten. He has no equal. So the very famous verse, it appears on Reformed dirhams. It also appears elsewhere on Umayyad coppers, and it's an expansion of the statement of God's unity. The bottom left, we have an interesting coin. We have a lily on the reverse, and around that lily we have he sent Muhammad, the messenger of God, but it's a circular legend. So you could begin reading it with the word God, and it would say God sent Muhammad, the messenger of God, or you could say he sent Muhammad, the messenger of God. But it's a circular legend, so you can almost start it or stop it at different places, and it would still make sense. The phrase "he sent the messenger of God" is a excerpt from a very famous legend that appears on many Muslim coins, and it appears on dirhams, and it's basically goes, they'll say Muhammad is the messenger of God. He sent him to establish right guidance and the religion of truth. He sent him with right guidance and the religion of truth to establish it over the polytheists, even if they detest it. And so the two Quranic verses that appear on Umayyad dirhams appear in a much abbreviated excerpts here on these two coins, and that reinforces the image, the association of these images of nature with God and the Quran. Now we have another coin that we showed you before that has a longer version, a longer excerpt of the last legend that the excerpt from the Quran that I mentioned. And so on the obverse, we have the image of the fox, and we have this false was struck in Hims. In the reverse field, we have by the command of Marwan bin Bashir. And then around that legend, we have this declaration: Muhammad is the messenger of God. He sent him with right guidance and the religion of truth. And so the rest of the verse is to establish it over all religion, even if the polytheists detest it. So now we don't actually have a statement of God's unity. All we have is that image of the fox. But everywhere else on these coins, you have both the statement of unity and the statement of God's messengership, of Muhammad's messengership. So it symbolically, there may be an ellipsis here in the audience may supply that statement of God's unity when they look at the fox. There's a certain symbolic ambiguity, but there it is. If that were the case, the name on the reverse, by the command of Marwan bin Bashir, would raise the question of whether or not this ruler is being held equivalent to the fox on the obverse, and by extension to God. A little bit ambiguous, but here's something else to consider. The fox is a very interesting, the word for fox in Arabic is Muawiyah, or there's different words for fox, but one of the words is Muawiyah. And Muawiyah is a very common name, rulers in the Umayyad dynasty. I found 5 family members with the name Muawiyah for the Umayyad family. And Muawiyah is otherwise a very rare and unusual name in that time period. So when you look at that image of the fox, you could think of God, you could think of the Umayyad dynasty, or you can conflate them with both. And then we have, by the command of Marwan bin Bashir, Marwan bin Bashir, maybe he's claiming to be equivalent to God, or maybe he's claiming to act upon the wishes of God. When we find on the reverse that we have this saying, Muhammad is the messenger of God, that he sent him with right guidance, the religion of truth. Perhaps that is the model of authority that Marwan bin Bashir is appealing to. In which case, Marwan has been appointed as a rightful ruler in the same way as Muhammad was appointed rightful ruler by God, 100 years before. So those are kind of symbolic associations that you can consider in addition or alongside the image of a wild nature. Now, this image of the fox is something that's been much debated, and I did a paper. It was previously called a jerboa, and I've argued that it is a fox, and I have a lot of arguments for that. It certainly doesn't look like a jerboa, but it has very distinctive features, and it has, you can see the claws on the feet, you can see a thick tail, you can see the mouth opened, and you can see the pointy ears, and all of these resemble an Arabian fox that would have been, that lives in Syria. But one of the most distinctive features about this image is the posture of the body. That posture is very unusual. It's not the posture of a herbivore, it's a posture of a carnivore, and in fact, it's a posture of a fox when it hunts. Foxes do something very interesting when they hunt. They jump up in the air, they double their body, and then they throw their head down head first into either snow or grass, depending on where they live. That behavior is called micing, because their common prey is mice. So that is not just an image of a fox, that is an image of a fox in the process of hunting its prey. So it has a very aggressive posture. And so I'm going to suggest that we keep that aggressive posture in mind when we connect that thoughts with Marwan bin Bashir, or by extension, the 5 different Muawiyahs of the Umayyad dynasty, as well as the Qur'anic verse that surrounds Muhammad, Marwan bin Bashir's name legend. And when with that verse, it says, Muhammad is the messenger of God. He sent him with great guidance and religion of truth to establish over all religion, even if the polytheists detest it, implies the use of force or coercion to impose that right guidance. And so now we have a kind of a more very specific association for the this natural motif that goes beyond just a kind of a general evocation of God, being, God's presence, or God being bountiful, or God being all powerful, or things like that. And that is unique to this coin, but it does suggest that image of nature held a symbolic force, significance to the people who observed it. Okay, so now, why did we have these pictorial types? These pictorial types are very different from the coinage that preceded them in Syria. They're also very different from the pictorial types that you might have in Iran Shah to the east. The coins that preceded them emphasized, to the extent that they had images, they emphasized the sun, to a lesser extent the moon, or wheat. They did not have animals on them, with one exception, and that was a bird that appears on a stand, but that bird is a domesticated bird. It is under the control of the ruler. So that's very different from these images. These images are all standalone images of nature with no human representation. If you look in the East, you have images. Early on, you had images of nature, lots of camels and lions. You had mythological animals, the Gotpat Shah, the Simurg. You had, but the one thing you notice in the images of animals in the East is they have human beings controlling them, or they have, or the images show domesticated animals. They show animals in a domesticated pose or posture. So we have, you'll have pictures of camels with riders, human riders on them, horses with human riders on them. You will have pictures of horses that are standing still, implying their domestication, their state of domestication. You will have ducks, walking. You won't have birds flying. You would have lions in Iran Shah, but the lions that get depicted in the main parts of Iran Shah are not jumping or attacking, they are walking as if they've been domesticated. And the mythological animals you have are all connected to human beings. The Gotpat Shah has the body of a bull, the head of a human being. The Simurg is a mythological animal that brings the special glory to the ruler. So it's connected to a human being. And so there is a fundamental difference then between the representation of nature in the East and the West. Now, during this period, the last, say, decade and a half of the Umayyad period, the Umayyads were experiencing quite a bit of turmoil. And the turmoil wasn't just in the East, it was actually in Syria itself. There was a succession crisis in the early 740s, where you had in a short time, you had 3 different caliphs. Walid II overthrew Yazid III, and so you had there was and these were so the successions were in dispute, and moreover the base of support in Syria for the caliph was diminishing. When Marwan II, the last Umayyad caliph, took power in about 744, he moved the capital from Damascus to Haran in the Jazira between Iran Shah and Syria. And so the ability of the caliphate to maintain control over these lands was called into question. And the idea of the models of authority that worked before were not working during this time. There was administrative ambiguity with the turmoil. It was the lines of authority were not clear. Which city belonged to which ruler, or which administrator, or which governor, or how it was to be. The city of Hims rebelled twice and had to be put down. The second time, the city walls were destroyed by Marwan II. Damascus rebelled, and that had to be separate. And then in Palestine, there was a number of rebellions against the caliphate. So in that atmosphere, by choosing an image of nature, you're obviating the need to identify the person or the ruler that is in charge. The final piece of influence was possibly the influence of Iran Shah and the Abbasid propaganda. As in case of Iran Shah, they were far more open, right up even to the late Umayyad, early Abbasid period, to showing representations of human beings. On their copper coins, you have busts of rulers right up into the early Abbasid period. You have, and certainly the late Umayyad period. You also had much freer representation of animals, although those animals were subject to human authority. And then with Abbasid propaganda, you had an emphasis. You had a challenge to Umayyad authority, but you have an emphasis on the family of the prophet as the rightful heirs to the caliphate. And you also had an emphasis on the Quran as a basis for authority, independent of the claims of a dynasty. And so in that sense, what we find with these pictorial types, they are evoking images that you can find in the Quran. And they are also mentioning the Quran in subtle ways. And that may have also been drawn from the ascendancy of the Abbasids in the East. So, thank you very much. I'm very interested in any questions or comments people have.
Thank you very much, Stuart. This was an incredibly fascinating presentation. I'm excited to learn more about these pictorial coins. It's totally different from anything I thought I knew about Islamic coins. So yeah, anyone, Ralph, you've raised your hand. Please go ahead.
Yeah, boy, thank you very much. That was really great. I learned more about 8th century Syro-Palestinian coins than I've learned over a very long time. But looking at the triggers for what might have been a factor in bringing this on, I'm wondering, right next door in the Byzantine Empire, you've got the heart of the period of iconoclasm, with all this controversy over images. Now, I mean, it would be difficult to say whether how much, if any, there was any kind of causation there. But would you think there was perhaps some kind of cross-fertilization, getting people to think about how images are used?
Yes, and that's a very, very, very important topic, and perhaps even an entirely different lecture. What's interesting is absolutely there's got to be a connection, and I think that when we think about culture, we ought to think about geographical culture more so than particular religious traditions or ethnic groups. In Syria, when you start going into iconoclasm, and I'm not an expert in Byzantine history, so I can stand corrected if I say anything wrong. But the origins of iconoclasm in the Byzantine Empire are a little bit murky, but they seem to come from Syria and Palestine. There is even a report that it came in Tiberias, and somebody wants to attribute it to Jews in Tiberias. And I think that to simply say that people are against images doesn't really explain what they believe in. If to describe what people don't believe in is not as meaningful explaining what people do believe. And so I think that, and this I think is where there may be a connection between iconoclasm and the Muslim prohibition of images and actually their use of the sort of al-ikhlas. There is in the Umayyad period, I think there is a movement to emphasize the charismatic authority of the ruler. And if you're talking about the charismatic authority of the ruler, you're really talking about the Spirit of God. And when the people talk about iconoclasm, not venerating images, or when they talk about in the sort of gloss, God is one, God is eternal, he was not born, he does not beget. What they're trying to emphasize is God's spiritual nature rather than his corporeal presence. And this is very different from Iran. In Iran, you get the image of rulers all the time, right up to the late Umayyad period. So in a sense, what you find in Syria is there is perhaps even an exaggerated attempt to distance the physical person of the ruler from God and argue for his spiritual identity with God. So the ruler has a spiritual identity with God, but his person is separate. And there's certain groups of Christians, late antiquity, who argued that Jesus Christ was not born the Son of God, he became the Son of God. The Spirit of God came down, and when the Spirit of God came down to Jesus Christ, he became God. And there were other groups that opposed that. And so in some ways, I think that what we're talking about is ultimately what is the relationship of the ruler with God, and what is the relationship of God with humankind. So I think it needs to be worked out a lot more, but I think there's probably a lot of fertile ground there.
Thank you.
Yeah, John, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me? Am I audible?
If you could speak up, that would be helpful.
Okay. Thanks, Stuart. I think that's a very interesting and convincing analysis of the symbolism of these plants and animals. But one thing I'm curious about is why are these images confined to the copper coinage? I assume they don't appear in the silver and gold issues of Damascus or Tiberias or these other cities.
Right. Okay, good question. So silver and gold were centrally regulated coinages. The caliphate controlled those coinages. And the copper was, by this time, strictly local coinage. And it was that way all around the caliphate. There may have been, certain attempts to regulate the copper coinage, but they nearly all failed. I think Lutzilish mentions when the coppers were first introduced that there was an attempt to make them centrally regulated, but within a short time it just didn't work. And the copper and the silver, the silver and the gold, that reformed type was introduced by the Umayyads, by Abdul-Malik bin Marwan, and that remained a centrally regulated type. There's very little variation in the legends or the iconography of those coins. And so because of that, you have the difference in the thematic treatment of these coinages. I think there's largely the difference between what the caliphate wanted to project as its as the basis for its authority, and what local people or local rulers or governors were willing and able to project as the basis of their authority. And I guess that what we see here then is really on some level the assertion of a local or regional authority in sort of cultivating this alternative group of types, but ultimately it didn't go very far.
Yeah, any other questions? And if you have them, feel free to just unmute yourself and ask. Okay, well, in the chat, Warren had an observation that the bird flying to the right looks like a bird standing if the coin is rotated 90 degrees left.
Right. So if you want to turn the coin on the side it's standing, the feet are extended, the legs are extended. The representation of these animals are frequently, it's not a natural pose. So a bird would not normally stand like that. Okay. To the extent it has a feet extended behind it, you have to think of something like a crane, because normally birds will pull their feet up, tuck them in. And the possibility, and so these are not naturalistic representations, but one thing that suggests is in Tiberias or Tiberia in the Arabic, is near a lake and is near a flyway where birds migrate, and so that would have been an image that would have been representative of that region. But
right. Yeah, well, thank you again, Stuart. Also, thanks in the chat. We really appreciate you being here and sharing this. Like I said, it's just such a phenomenal presentation.